This episode of the Bloody Vegans podcast is brought to you by VegOne and the good folks over at the Vegan Society. VegOne is the multivitamin and mineral supplement designed by vegans for vegans. It was introduced back in 2005, updated in 2021 with an incredible new plastic-free package, and contains all of those key vitamins and minerals that everyone will tell you when you transition into a plant-based diet, into a vegan lifestyle, that you need to think about, and you absolutely do. So what's in there? You've got B2, B6, B12, D3, iodine, selenium and folic acid. So all of those kind of key ones you need to consider when you're starting out, or perhaps you've been here for some time. And it's all in a convenient once a day chewable form, which is super helpful, right? It's just £12.70 for 6 months worth, and they come in two amazing flavours. You've got orange and you've also got blackcurrant. Orange is a personal favourite of mine. I'm definitely team orange when it comes to VegOne. So if you'd like to know more and you're interested in picking up your 6-month supply, head over to thevegansociety.com, search for VegOne, and you can pick up some right there, delivered straight to your door. Enjoy the episode.
It began when my wife and I got engaged. We made an agreement between us that we would not only seek the truth, but when we found it, we would live it. That's a big difference from just looking for it. And we went, early in our marriage, went to a movie, I think it was called Mondo Cane, A Dog's World. And in it, they had all the insanities of the world, which are many. They could have made 100 movies of all the insanities. And one of them was, they had these 4 men in, I think they're called wading boots, the fishing boots, they come up to their waist.
Yeah.
And they were hitting a big bull over the head with 4 sledgehammers, Whoa, as hard as a man could hit. And we came out of that theater and we said, wow, is that how they get meat? Well, we can't eat meat anymore. That's the truth. And we have to live that one. And that's when it began. And shortly we stopped eating meat. And then about 2 years after that, we visited a dairy, because we continued to eat dairy. We didn't put it together yet. We visited that dairy behind the scenes, not where they want you to look. And we discovered the taking away of the calf and the moaning of the mother. For the woman said, oh, you'll get used to it. Only she moans only about 3 weeks. You'll get used to it. So, well, we don't want to get used to it. And that was the end of dairy for us. This is in 1970.
Right.
So back then, you couldn't get anything. We couldn't get anything from shoes to ice cream to anything. It all had some either dairy in it or something from animals. And it took years before, in order to get our ice cream fix, we used to shoot Ready Whip, that product in a can, like whipped cream. And God knows what was in there. And that was our ice cream. Anyway, now it's quite a thing to see. It's my most hopeful thing in this otherwise very hopeless world, especially now. I've never seen anything like it. I don't know how the UK is doing, but we're really in a problem here in the States, major.
Was it, when you mention it and you describe it in those terms, it sounds very, you just drew logical conclusions from what you'd seen and made pretty instant switches. Were those changes as rapid as that, or was there kind of like any kind of transition period for you back in 1970?
Not at all. We never ate meat again at that time, and once we went to that dairy, we never ate dairy again.
Wow. And you mentioned there wasn't a lot of products out there. Yeah,
there wasn't anything. Nobody heard the word vegan. We didn't know the word. We didn't know there was a word. We didn't know anybody else had ever done it. I mean, we had heard of some vegetarians that were regarded as nuts.
Right.
Back then. Although nuts, they were 100 years old, jumping out of planes and pulling trains with their teeth, and yet people considered them the nuts, which they still do. And of course, it's reversed.
Absolutely. What was kind of like the reaction like? You mentioned like your view of or the view that you'd seen of vegetarians was nuts. What did you kind of receive when you made these switches?
I lost out almost every friend I ever had back then. They wouldn't, as a matter of fact, my own brother wouldn't talk to me for what turned out to be years. He thought
Wow.
I would spoil his children by
Really?
telling them about where meat came from. So it was, well, I made new friends when I actually, my wife and I started a commune. Back then it was called a commune of people who were vegan. Otherwise, we had to stop eating with relatives. My mother would sneak some meat gravy or something into the dish because they thought we would die. They
Right.
thought we didn't get protein and we would die. Of course, the reverse happened. I lost a lot of friends. A couple of friends actually locked me out of their house, locked us, not just me, my
Wow.
wife and I. So anyway, we started a commune, and eventually it grew to 35 people, all vegan, of course, and that kept us together for about 40 years, 35 or 40 years.
Wow.
The community is really, especially nowadays, the world doesn't realize it. The whole world's a community. I wish they would realize it.
There's a really interesting point I want to pick up on there, if it's all right, that you mentioned. And obviously, I only went vegan in 2017. So my view of your journeys, like our journeys they're quite different in terms of the reaction that I received. In 2017, folks were, they were pretty receptive. I mean, there was a little bit of, there still is a little bit of being the 1%, and so it's, you're considered a little crazy and this kind of thing in mainstream kind of culture. But there's you almost mentioned it as if there was a tone of like dangerous to it back in 1970. Was that the kind of the view of folks, that there was almost a corrupting influence if you were to choose this lifestyle?
Well, mainly because people believe that protein only came from animal products.
Right.
In fact, there was a famous book where you had to combine perfect protein. You had to
Right.
combine it. It wasn't until years later they found out proteins in pretty much everything that's green, I guess.
And tell us about how you go about starting a commune back then, and what was the reception and reaction like that when you told friends and family that this is what you were going to do.
Well, back then it was easy. It's not so easy anymore. Back then, people were looking for community, young people.
Right.
And now it's become a all for one, a do it myself belief,
Mm, mm,
which is unreal in any case. Nobody's doing anything by themselves. And the truth is, if everybody got together, even just groups got together, for one thing, economically, we would, let's say 25 people, if we all earned $100 a week. I mean, you can do the math. That gives you a lot of money. And we all
mm.
had the same interests and the same purposes in mind. And that's so we would buy a house cheap and then elevate to a little more expensive house. And we've been doing that for years. We still are.
Hmm. Was it easy to find folks who were kind of on the same wavelength?
Back then, it was just so much easier. Although today there are we have these what we call woofers. These are people who come to young people usually who come to help us for room and board. And when we first started, I would say 15% were vegan to begin. These young people were vegan to begin with. Nowadays, I'd say it's about 80%. And in the beginning, it was almost all male. And another interesting, I don't know why. And today, it's probably 85% female that come to do that work. Yeah, things have definitely changed. And the only thing I see that's changed for the better is the acceptance of veganism. I just
Mm.
looked up all the celebrities, the actors and celebrities who are vegan, and that number is growing and growing and growing. And every time, we had a celebrity banquet 2 years running
Right.
where we had, I'd say we had about 40 famous people at the time, Sidney Poitier and Casey Kasem. They were just famous people at the time
Wow. Wow.
that came. We fed them. We did everything for them for free because we wanted to influence those who influence others. We figured if we could
Right.
make John Candy, who was an actor who was obese, if we could make him vegan and he could lose 50 pounds or 100 pounds, which he could have before he died, that he would influence a lot of people. Anyway, I'm sure it helped. The Phoenixes are vegan, for one thing, River and Joaquin and the whole family. Now it's even the grandchildren. He's my nephew, by the way, just to throw that in. Joaquin, River, and my nephews.
Really?
Yeah, and their grandchildren now are vegan from birth, which is quite a thing. We know a lot of kids who are vegan from birth. What an exciting thing that is.
I've got one myself, actually.
Really?
He's only 3.5. He's on his way to bed as we speak. But
Well, you've done a lot. What is it? 5 years? Not even 5 years. That's amazing.
yeah, it's wonderful to see a little activist at 3.5 already questioning other people when they're eating meat
They
and things.
do. They
He does
do that.
he does it in a lovely, gentle way, but
Yeah.
in a kind of just a he cuts to the chase of why would you eat an animal? It
Right.
doesn't make any sense.
Right.
He kind of gets that at this. I think we have that kind of eroded out of us, in society.
Yeah. It's called adulterated. We be,
Right.
we become adulterated. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what do you attribute? You mentioned it. Obviously, veganism being much more accepted is one of the positives that you've seen over the course of the years. What do you attribute that to? You mentioned it's really interesting. This idea of like influencer culture isn't a new thing. I think sometimes people think it's quite a new thing, but obviously it's not at all. Probably used to call it celebrity culture before that kind of thing. But what do you attribute the acceptance of veganism to over the years?
Well, I'd say the main contributor is that it's the truth. And I think the internet
Mm,
has shown that to every young person who can operate it. There's, as you know, there's pictures now of slaughterhouses where when I was a kid, and I hardly ever heard of it. Speaking of slaughterhouses, there shouldn't even be a word in the
mm.
human lexicon, slaughterhouse. We shouldn't abide with the word slaughter, or that a slaughterhouse should exist. I mean, just the term itself, let alone what they do. But I think the internet has been a tremendous, tremendous ally in that struggle. Of course, the internet has good and bad, obviously, about it.
Yeah, talking of that, and obviously, there's as you mentioned, there's been lots of benefits to the internet in terms of the spread of information and things like that. It'd be good to just understand your viewpoint on where you think there are potential pitfalls for us in the kind of the quote unquote vegan community around whether it be internet, social media, these kind of communications, as much as they've brought some benefits to us. When I think about what I see in kind of social media in internet culture, and particularly around vegan culture, I see sometimes that the ethics, sometimes the why behind some of of what it is that we're doing is kind of missing from it. It's almost a bit of a lifestyle thing, which means that people can be a little transient in their kind of passing of veganism. They sort of say, I'm vegan for a period of time. And you've seen this with some celebrities who've claimed they are vegan, and then a year later they've then almost been as disparaging of it as they were passionate about it at the beginning. So I see some negatives in that regard. I wanted to get your perspective on have you seen anything similar?
I have seen that. I've seen people even closer than that to me that have gone back. I don't know. I can't think that they ever had it in their hearts and their minds
Mm,
enough. I can't even consider going back. It's just, I couldn't even consider it. Uh, I don't know if I'd blame the internet though. A lot of people do it for the diet, for the hipness of it, and of
mm,
course, if it
mm,
doesn't have a solid foundation, that it's the truth. It's as simple as that. We're killing the people with 4 legs. and funny eyes and funny noses. That's about the only difference. I just found out that one of your UK people, my favorite comic, Ricky Gervais,
Yeah.
as I know, just became vegan. Oh, I like him even more now.
Yeah, for some time, I think folks certainly online have been pressuring Ricky Gervais to sort of become vegan, given that he's often quite outspoken from a animal activism point of view. He often talks about animal rights issues and so on and so forth on his platforms, but yet hadn't quite made that leap. So it is wonderful to see in your years, sort of, in this community, as a passionate vegan yourself. What have you found are some of the most effective ways to communicate the message to others?
Funny you should ask. Well, my mother was a professional chef, and my stepfather owned a hotel in which food was probably the most important, resort hotel, probably the most important aspect of the business. So when we first became vegan, we ate at the only other vegan's home we knew of. And they were nice, wonderful people, but the food was so bland. I mean, really bland, that I knew I couldn't talk anybody into switching from what they were eating into that. So we became the food people. We we trained. We at one time we had the only true vegan chef I know of in this country. I mean, from what we knew, now there are hundreds of them all over the place. You got to understand, back then there were no vegan restaurants. There just wasn't anything vegan. Shoes, vegan. They didn't even mention the word vegan. Like, and if they ever did on TV, it was to make a joke of it. If they had tofu on the sitcom, somebody was making fun of it, which I noticed they don't do anymore, which is a nice change. Yeah. Tofu, they didn't have tofu. I never heard the word tofu back then. So anything we wanted, we had to travel, usually across country, to get anything like bread. Couldn't get bread. It all had whey, W-H-E-Y. They all had something in them that we couldn't eat. But you know what? We loved it. We would travel in the car, and we'd go to a grocery store and buy all the vegetarian canned food, like canned corn, canned peas. And then we'd open a number 10 can, a big can of peanuts, Planters peanuts. Well, every time we opened that, we stuck that can opener in there in the car, and that peanut smell wafted through the car. It made me hungry. And we'd throw some raisins in there, and we loved it. I still love peanuts and raisins. And we didn't care because mainly, Jim, it was the first time that either of us, my wife or I, knew we were doing something right, that we couldn't be talked out of. Pretty much anything I did back then, some expert could come over and tell me I wasn't doing it right. But God himself could have come down and said, no, you can eat animals. Okay. I would say, you must be an imposter, because no God in my head or heart could ever believe that. So it was an irrefutable truth. It was the first and maybe the only irrefutable truth I knew at that time. And it's pretty much one of the few I know now.
When you sort of started out, and it's really fascinating listening to the kind of the food journey specifically in real practical terms. Did you know what you were gonna eat? You made this logical decision that we're going to make these shifts. What was that process like?
Well, that was kind of funny too. When we first got married, my wife didn't know how to cook, so she made fried rice by throwing the rice into a frying pan. Of course, it came out like BBs. I had to call my mother and find out that you got to boil it first. And she went on to become a really good vegan chef, my wife. But we knew we would eat a lot of pasta, which we did, spaghetti and pasta. And we really didn't care, because we could eat anything that tasted good that wasn't animal. And it really wasn't that hard to find. And of course, we limited our diet compared to what we used to eat, but we knew we were doing what was right. And boy, that's thrilling. It's still thrilling. All these, what is it, 52 years later, it's still thrilling to do what's right. And when these young people come to work with us, our main thing is to feed them delicious food. And that's something they remember and take home with them. They usually cook for their parents when they get home. You know, we opened a restaurant along this food line on Maui, Hawaii. We wanted to open a restaurant long before that, but we could never live in a city. And until we got to Maui, we could open in a little town. There were lines outside the door. I think if I remember, I don't remember, it cost us, let's say, 100,000. We made it back in maybe a year and a half. Every young person on Maui came to our restaurant, and everything was delicious. We had a sign over the door, you know, McDonald's. I guess you have McDonald's there too.
Yeah.
We have a sign, 1 million served. Well, we have now, it's probably 1 billion. We had a sign over our door that said 1 million saved. We thought that was
great.
Making a point. And we would have on every table, we would have a placemat that explained from great people like Leonardo da Vinci's point of view as to why one shouldn't hurt animals. In other words, it was not only a meal, but an educational experience. And if people brought their parents in who came to visit them in Maui, we would bring the parents a plate of everything we served, a little of it each, because we knew it was delicious. Yeah. That was our point. We wanted to that was our whole goal with veganism, was to make it delicious. And we still do that. So we actually went to the point of opening a restaurant. We did 2 vegan banquets in Hollywood. I told you my nephew was River Phoenix. So with his help and the help of Casey Kasem, who was he was a top 40s, the most famous radio guy, who became a vegan. He was a vegetarian, but he really sweet guy, by the way. Passed away a few years back. Anyway, we opened a vegan. We started a vegan banquet. Had a lot of celebrities. We didn't charge them anything. We had valet parking. Everything was fancy because we knew they were people who expected fancy. So we didn't charge them. We did everything, you know, first class. And we fed them. We fed them from every country you can imagine. We had Italian food, Chinese food, Jewish food, just every kind of food.
Really?
In a different booth. And boy, did we eat well. They did too.
That's amazing.
When they left. And then we would take what was left over to Steven Spielberg and famous people and fill up their freezers. Back then, for some reason, there was an interest. I don't remember the year it was, but there was a little interest in recycling. It was just starting. And so all these celebrities whose money meant nothing to them, they just said, fill my freezer. It didn't matter what it cost. So we ended up actually, even though that banquet cost us, I don't know, back then maybe $20,000, I think we ended up making 30, as it turned out. Just a sign that if you move in truth, you get rewarded, even financially.
Wow. How did you become connected with all these different folks? I'm fascinated by how you became almost the vegan kind of go-to chef for these folks, or the source of this amazing food that was filling up their freezers. How did you get to know them all?
Well, to begin with, that River, of course, was a celebrity himself. Joaquin was a little younger at that time. He was probably about 5. And we didn't have a lot of competition. We weren't.
Right.
There still isn't a lot of competition. We were the only vegan commune. As far as I know, we were the only vegan commune in the States that I know of.
Yeah.
So we didn't have a lot of competition. And for some reason, people back then were just turning their eyes toward something a little better in their lives.
Have you seen the environmental message particularly grow over the years? Do you think that's become probably louder than some of the other messaging around veganism in recent years, particularly?
Absolutely. Yeah, I was very glad to learn that it's that animal agriculture is a cause of more environmental destruction than all the other things put together.
This episode of the Bloody Vegans podcast is brought to you by VEG1, the multivitamin and mineral supplement designed by the good folks over at the Vegan Society. It was launched back in 2005. As I said, designed by the Vegan Society, the OGs in the game. What more trusted resource when it comes to all things vegan and all things vegan nutrition can you have than the Vegan Society? Launched back in 2005, as I said, and in 2021 they redesigned that packaging from the little plastic tub it used to come in to a wonderful new plastic-free and perfectly reusable metal design. It's wonderful. You can even pop little crayons in it. Just ask my little 3.5-year-old boy Arthur, who's got his crayons in it as we speak. Aside from that, though, it offers you all the reassurance that a multivitamin designed by vegans for vegans would give you. You've got B2 in there, you've got B6, you've got B12, folic acid, iodine, selenium, all the kind of things that everyone tells you you're going to keel over if you don't have. So it's great to know that, reassuringly, they're in that packet there. They're in there in a once-a-day format that's chewable, reliable, and really affordable. I think it's £12.70 for a 6-month supply. Comes in 2 flavours. You get orange or blackcurrant. What more? What more could we want, hey? So, as I said, this episode sponsored by VEG1 and the good folks at the Vegan Society. Enjoy.
Cowspiracy. Keegan the vegan lived with us for a while.
Really? Did he? He's been on this podcast, actually. He was on a few weeks back.
Yeah, interesting guy. But I knew back then, he was a young guy, but I knew he could write and he could think. You know, I read a few things he wrote, and I knew. Yeah, so that was wonderful to find that out. That's a great help, a tremendous help nowadays. They are the cause of, and you notice that nobody talks about it. That's why you know that people aren't sincere when they're talking about environmental changes and they never mention the cows. You say, how can you, that's the cow in the room, so to speak. That's the elephant cow in the room. How could you leave that out? Because
in your view, what's the route to us getting folks to listen to that message? Because I mean, back in 2017, it was Cowspiracy for me, and it's fascinating that there's this link between Keegan and yourself, and now we're chatting now. Because if it wasn't for that film, I wouldn't have been turned on to this whole thing, you know. So it was the day after that I went vegan, and I had that feeling of, how have I never heard this before? How have I never heard these connections being made? And it was super, super powerful. But even since then, you hear bits. Obviously, and the more you're in the world, you're in the community, you hear more and more. But when I talk to folks who are who aren't necessarily tuned into the kind of to the quote unquote vegan community, they're not necessarily hearing that message. What in your view is the kind of the route to getting folks to sit up and pay attention, whether it be from a climate change point of view in this perspective, or an animal activism point of view in another?
I decided being the truth, which is going to win out eventually. I think the hope is in young people.
Right.
Which has always been the hope in any revolution or evolution, is always the young people. The old people have too much invested, for one thing. Invested in the past. That's my hope, is the young people, and I see all these really, like you were speaking, the kids, all the kids I see, and I know many of them. That's a new world, and that's my hope, is in the youth of the world. Of course, my world is here in the U.S.
What took you to Maui, to Hawaii? Like, how did you get over to there? Like, I'd love to hear the journey to setting up where you are now.
Well, we spent most of our major community time in Florida, which was kind of easier living because there's no winter to speak of. And we actually went to Australia. They wouldn't let us in Australia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I put down when they asked what I do for a living, I said I'm a vegan activist. They didn't like that. They wouldn't let us in. So
Wow.
instead, we went to New Zealand, which turned out because we have actually 454 acres with two rivers in New Zealand, which we haven't been able to go to because of COVID, which has really hurt us. We haven't been able to go in, I guess, 3 years now, 3 or 4 years, whatever it is. And anyway, on the way there, we stopped in Hawaii and loved it. And it was a big move. We were in Florida at the time. We had to move 20, 25 people. We first moved to Maui, and we were the only vegans on Maui. Actually, there was one woman who was, she was an archer. She was in the Olympics, actually, as an archery. She was the only vegan on this whole hip island, as hip as you could be. Nothing in the States was hipper than Maui, Hawaii. And we couldn't believe there wasn't a vegan there. So we opened a restaurant. We opened a vegan restaurant. We called it The Vegan. And as I said, there were lines outside the door every night. And we changed a lot of minds and hearts on Maui to make it vegan. And that's where, as far as I know, that's where Maui became as vegan as it is. I don't know how it is today, but it's a lot more vegan than it was.
And whereabouts are you now?
On the Big Island. It's
right.
Yeah. They were really original with their names. Anyway, it's actually bigger than all the others put together. And it's a wonderful place to live. Even now, today, I look outside, it's like summertime. It's sunny and bright and warm. And of course, in the mainland, it's really going nuts with the weather. Freezing, fires, flooding. I'm very glad we're here.
Is that like very real consequence of climate change that people are kind of seeing? Are you seeing any kind of or hearing any sense that people are making any connections with their lifestyle choices, what they're eating, and so on and so forth, with some of the actual real life effects they're seeing?
Well, people are aware of people who are living in whatever, in fires and 10 degrees. I think they're beginning to see, contrary to disbelievers, I think they're beginning to see there might be some effect here with all this stuff we're shooting into the air, including the rockets they're shooting into the air that they don't mention. You see that cloud behind those rockets, which I wonder also, that's, if you want to go through, you could add a mantra to everything you say about the world. Well, isn't that insane? Including, what are we going to Mars for? We got people starving. Whatever, every 10 days, some little kid starves. What are we spending billions of dollars? What are we going to do on Mars? Ruin that planet? And what are we doing? I always tell these young people, it's so insane that they have these puppy mills where they make dogs and mistreat them terribly. And there are all these dogs, they kill a million, a billion. The numbers don't even mean anything anymore in these animal rescue. You'll pardon the expression. The animal rescue, ASPCA, when all they got to do is stop those puppy mills. You want a dog, you go and you rescue one. We have two here now. They're inseparable. They were a half hour from being, they say, euthanized. But euthanization usually takes the acceptance of the party being euthanized. That's usually the definition. Whereas if you don't have the permission, I would call it murder. It seems more apropos. It's just part of the insanity. We live, Mark Twain posthumously published where he said, now that I understand the world is an insane asylum, every question I have stands explained. That's why. And that's the truth. If you look at this world, like even now, they're talking about going to war again. With this
Mm.
Russian thing, they they haven't had enough. They got neo Nazis now. One Hitler wasn't enough. They thought it was such a good idea. They're bringing back the thought of Nazism again. It's a nut house. There's no way around it. Killing animals to eat them when we're not even made to do. We're not lions. We don't have the teeth and the lust for blood. Although some people do, but we're not one of them. It's just, you can add after every sentence, you can add, isn't that insane for what people do? I don't know what's going to change that. Veganism is my hope because people don't realize who aren't vegan that it changes your cells in your body and in your brain. Whereas I used to, let's say, throw trash out the car window when I was a kid or young. Now I go out, every walk, I take a plastic bag to pick up the garbage. Your whole mindset changes and you get gentler. I've seen thousands of people become vegan. I've seen dogs become vegan. All our dogs have been vegan, by the way, all these years, totally vegan. And I've seen really tough dogs become gentle dogs just as I've seen people who were tough people, fighting kind of people, become gentilized people from this change. And it's understandable. If you eat like a lion, you're going to act like a lion. If you eat like a zebra, you're going to act like a zebra.
I want to get your view, though. I mean, this might be a naive question, but when I look at 2022 life, and you mentioned some of the things that we've seen in society over the last few years, whether it's the inexplicable resurgence of Nazism, which is just mind blowing that we're there. That was is a thing that is happening. What do you think is, or do you think that division, that polarization, you mentioned at the very beginning, you talked about us moving away? It's more difficult for people. They don't want to find commune as much. They don't want to find community as much with each other. Do you think that it's got worse, ultimately, is my question? Or do you think this is just a cyclical thing? Things go round in circles. You've seen this kind of thing before, and that ultimately the good will out. There might be a retrograde step, and then we move forward 2 or 3.
Well, I was hoping that the Trump administration and all that went on would cause people to want to band together. They did, but in the wrong way. I don't know if I don't see, except for veganism, which, as I said, is going to change not just people eating habits, it's going to change them constitutionally. They're going to change their minds about things. I don't know what else is a hope of this world. I don't know how else we're going to gentilize. I called our commune, by the way, Gentle World for that reason. That's what the world needs. It needs to gentilize. Enough of this. Competitive. Everything's competitive. The nations are competitive. Individuals are competitive. I think that's one of the negatives of the internet. I thought I would see a resurgence of community life, but maybe, I don't know what the aftermath of COVID is going to be. People have learned, well, you see how many people have dropped out of work because they realized, for one thing, they can do it at home. And they also said, I don't like going into an office and leaving my family every day. So I'm hoping that it's really such a hope for people, especially people who are not the multi-billionaires that we have here, multi-billionaires. They didn't even have a word for billionaire when I was a kid. Nobody, even Rockefeller wasn't a billionaire. Nowadays, they got them by the handful. And I'm sure they care a lot about poor people. Just a little side-ish. There was a great movie by Mel Brooks called History of the World. don't know if you've ever seen it. A great
Yeah.
movie. And in one scene, he's got the Roman toga, the Roman senators in their togas going into the Senate room, and the leader says, "We just got an extra 30 million drachmas. Should we give them to the poor, or should we give ourselves a raise?" I don't know if I'm allowed to say this, but you can believe it if you want. To the last man, everybody raised their hand and said, "Fuck the poor." And that holds up. That holds up.
Nothing's
Holds up
changed,
to
huh?
this very day. That's how they feel. It's almost like
Yep.
they want it. And that's their hope, these poor people. They banded together. But the only thing that keeps them together, because people find it so hard to get along with each other, is veganism. That's what kept us together, that we had this great camaraderie that the rest of the world were opposed to. And that's what kept us together over all the years. Because we were together, I'd say, close to 40 years as a community.
It's incredible. I have the same. Maybe naive to say, but I have an optimism over some of the aspects of COVID, insofar as what it did. I think it did pause people and made them think a little bit. I can speak for myself and the folks that I've encountered. There's definitely a reevaluation of what's important in your life and what are you actually spending your limited amount of time on this planet doing. For me, that made me definitely turn away from the day job and move into things I was more passionate about and subjects I wanted to talk about full time, even if that meant financially that wasn't gonna be great at first, but kind of who cares? Like, as long as you can survive and then why not? Sort of the again goes back to that kind of mantra of the truth will out.
I agree wholeheartedly. I think COVID's ramifications are going to be more interesting than we think. But just as a note, you can never get hurt by going toward the truth financially or any other way. I mean, we gave up all those things too. I was a teacher before. And as it turned out, now we have property here, property there. And we never worked in the summer, by the way. We were like kids. When the summertime came, we took off and we actually spent our time in the woods in the north rim of the Grand Canyon. A beautiful area.
Wow.
We were there for 20 summers. And we just lived like we were kids. We take walks every day. And when we came back, we'd go to work. But you never hurt. For walking toward truth, you never hurt. So you don't have to worry financially. You'll bounce back somehow. You'll see.
Thank you. I appreciate those wise words, and I'll take your years of wisdom in doing the same thing as sort of fuel for my personal fire. Absolutely. I'm fascinated. You mentioned that there's folks who still come and work alongside you. Spend some time with you there at Gentle World. It'd be good to understand a little bit about what that looks like.
Well, we only discovered that, well, I guess now it's probably about, when you get to a certain age, everything's a long time ago. So it must be 15 years we discovered this Woofer program. It's great. You have these young people who are energetic and ready to work. And at the same time, we show them every video on veganism that we own, and it's quite a few. And I would say we have it could be a 95%. If they weren't vegan when they got here, they're vegan when they leave. It's a thrilling experience. Wow. And of course, it's great for us to be around all these, well, I don't know about us, but for me, by the way, I just turned last week, actually. It's hard for me to say. It's hard for me to say it, to believe, but I just turned 85.
Wow, congratulations. You don't look 85 at all. Like, that veganism's done you well.
It certainly has on every level, no question about it. I was a totally different guy as a in my early 20s. I don't even want to get into that, but it's just changed everything in my life for the better. I can't think of anything that it's made worse. Nothing. I mean, I can't even get across. I mean, when we started, it was just totally unheard of. It was so foreign to everybody. There wasn't a word. There wasn't anybody who even considered doing away with leather and silk, and it was just unheard of. And now, of course, it's, when I go to a supermarket, which is not often, and I see that vegan label stamped on, we used to put labels in the early days. We'd go into supermarkets and stick a label on the meat that said, this product will be dangerous to your health. And the people would buy it. When they got home, they would read this little stickers. We'd also put stickers on the back of cattle trucks and wait for the driver to get out. We used to think that they were the ones to approach because they had a vested interest, but they had a lot the drivers of these trucks to get them to see what they were doing.
Yeah,
because their vested interest wasn't the same as the owner of the slaughterhouse. His vested interest was huge.
yeah.
I always thought we should approach the issue through the weakest link, which at the time I still think it's the truck drivers. You can truck something else, we knew.
Yeah, like you say, they don't stand to lose as well. They stand to lose stuff because they've got a livelihood, etc. But it's not the same as people who've got a huge financial interest in something, and they've obviously made their own peace with that somehow. Whereas you get a job as a truck driver, I don't think anybody intends to be part of that system. They probably didn't, as kids, sort of grow up thinking, "I'll be part of that system." So yeah, I think you're right. And so often those people are kind of victims of that system as well. They're not intentional in their choice. Almost, it's just the way they've ended up.
They're all victims of that. Well, in a way, we're all victims of that system. Yeah, we got to change the system.
Yeah,
that's the only way I know to change it. Is by being vegan. The non-vegan doesn't realize that it changes every way you think. Hey, you're only a vegan, what is it, 5 years? You can see already you're thinking. You don't think the same way you used to.
No,
it gentilizes our whole being. It's what we're meant to be.
I love that idea. I don't know. I never really thought about it, about gentilizing, but it does. Your view of everything changes. Things that you wouldn't connect. You wouldn't necessarily say. Before this, I wouldn't have necessarily said that's a result of vegans are like this or like that or like the other. But certainly after going vegan, there are certain viewpoints I have over different things. You start to view things politically different. You start to view education system different. You start to look at all kinds of different things that you wouldn't have at the beginning of the journey. I would have never thought I'd thought about, but you so do. You're absolutely right about gentilizing.
It's like putting on glasses of truth, truth-seeing glasses, because it's not just veganism. Like you said, all of a sudden you look at everything differently. You look at, as I said, people throwing trash. You look at everything with this new vegan mind. With this new vegan mindset, it changes everything you see. And until one becomes a vegan, one doesn't understand that. It changes everything you know and see. Everything.
Like, I think that's a fantastic place to conclude where we're at. That's what we need to do: gentilize, veganize, and ultimately make the changes that we need. I'm absolutely in awe of your journey. I'm so thankful for your time. It's been incredible chatting with you. I will make sure I pop links to Gentle World in the show notes of the podcast, so folks can go and click on those and find out a little bit more. But I want to leave the final words to you, though, if that's all right.
Point out This is Keegan's shirt, I believe, isn't it? Did Keegan give me this? It says the future is vegan. Yeah, well, I can leave you with those words. The future is vegan. That's our only. It's our only hope.
I mean,
that I can see. It's our only hope. We got to become vegan. So once again, I thank you for this opportunity. I'm so impressed that you're a vegan for so short a time, and you're doing so much good. Every bit helps, and every big bit helps a big part. I thank you for that, and it's nice to see people carrying on this all important change is necessary for the human race.
Thank you, Light. It's been an absolute pleasure. This episode of the Bloody Vegans podcast is brought to you by VegOne from the Vegan Society. VegOne is the nutritional vitamin and mineral supplement designed for vegans by vegans. Launched back in 2005 and rebranded in 2021 with a fantastic new plastic-free package, VegOne provides nutritional support alongside a healthy and balanced vegan diet, all for an affordable price. With a 6-month supply available for just £12.70, VegOne will cost you little over £2 a month and offers EU nutrient reference values, or NRVs, of vitamin B12, D3, iodine, selenium, B2, B6 and folic acid. VegOne is chewable, it's affordable and reliable. You can take it once a day. It's available in fantastic orange and blackcurrant flavours. Super easy and convenient, completely plastic free. So why not head over to vegansociety.com, search for VegOne and take your next healthy steps into the world of veganism.